This is the ideal male body type. You may not like it, but this is what performance looks like.
Howdy. So, since I watched The Northman, I've been thinking about it way too much. Mostly because of this clip.
And there really hasn't been an accurate Viking movie ever before, and I was working with the greatest historians and archaeologists in the field, and you know, one thing is for sure, this is the most accurate Viking movie that's ever been made.
And this quote I found, where he claimed this movie would reclaim Vikings from white supremacists. Links in the description.
And as somebody who likes Vikings, but not white supremacists, it kind of bummed me out that I feel like it failed to do that.
One would think that, especially the latter one, would be an easy slam dunk, just don't cater to white supremacists. But obviously that's not so simple. And in a series of videos, I'd like to explore why indie darling Robert Eggers failed to take Vikings back. Today I'm going to start with historical accuracy and how it affects these goals. I'll preface by saying that I tend to be very utilitarian with my historical accuracy concerns. I don't actually care if the characters are in reenactor quality costumes, though as I understand the civilian garb in the sets for these movies were pretty accurate. What I actually care about is what historical accuracy, or lack thereof, has on the movie. And in this case, it plays into white nationalist fantasies. I'm referring to a sequence towards the beginning of the film where Amleth, the protagonist, and his Rusman buddies storm a Slavic settlement. As far as action goes, it's pretty cool. It's shot pretty stylishly, and it's well choreographed. I had a lot of fun watching Amleth murk some guys. As far as historical inaccuracy goes, many of you will have already noticed that they're naked. And frankly, I'm really impressed that you caught that. That was very keen of you. Unfortunately, the Vikings didn't leave behind many images of themselves, so it's not known for sure exactly what Viking warriors wore. Considering that these raids weren't exactly standardized, it's likely that Viking warriors wore a lot of different kit, based on what they could afford or scavenge. The people they're fighting are actually wearing pretty period-appropriate armor for the 10th century. But amongst the variety of kit Viking warriors could have worn, you could expect some rugged cloth, a steel helmet, a shield. The Vikings are actually really big on shield walls, and maybe some chainmail. Chainmail is really good, as I understand, and Vikings with access to chainmail probably wore it. As a matter of fact, if you want to see accurate Vikings in chainmail, just watch the scene until the middle, when Amleth's friends opened the gate and let in a band of fairly accurate Viking soldiers. Amleth and his buddies are supposed to be berserkers, I think, which the film interprets as a sort of naked, drugged-out special forces unit. But from what I could find, berserkers are kind of two things conflated together. Okay, so there's the practice of Norse warriors howling and biting their shields and flying into like a crazed fury, which those guys weren't exactly called berserkers. There's not really a name for that. That's just a thing they do in the sagas. And then there's berserkers as champions to a lord who fought in a berserk or a bear shirt, which is what berserk translates to, bear shirt. Or maybe they fought without armor. Apparently, bear could mean naked or the animal even back then. So there were champions that maybe wore bearskins and were maybe naked, and there were crazy howling guys, but having them be the same guy is mainly a modern pop culture thing. For some perspective, here's a drinking horn depicting a naked warrior alongside horned helmets, which themselves are famously fictitious on the battlefield. This scene here might actually be lifted directly from the horn. You can see the older gentleman there actually is wearing what looks like a very similar horned helmet. But just because the old man wears the helmet in the ritual doesn't mean he wears it into battle, because that would be stupid. And similarly, it doesn't mean that their elites went in naked just because they would psych themselves up naked. They remind me a lot of the Spartans in 300, which happens to be a movie infamous for being beloved by white supremacists. It plays into the trope of men so macho and so powerful that they don't need wildly popular and effective equipment that has been proven to keep people alive over the course of 1,000 years. But if it was just that he was naked, I wouldn't be making this video. I'd be making some other content, I guess. Amleth and his naked buddies storm a set of walls during broad daylight against resolute defenders without any siege equipment like ropes or ladders, and without taking a single casualty. And don't tell me any of them died off screen, because I counted them, and it was really hard because they wouldn't stop moving around. All of this bullshit combines to create a fever dream of a power fantasy, where Amleth and his buddies succeed in this suicide mission because they're furries. It really is because they're furries, but also because they're hard. Men. The film implies with this nonsense that these guys are simply better, and that despite all logic working against them, their Viking spirit was too much for these inferior people, almost as if they were divinely destined to win the battle. And this strays dangerously close to Ubermensch territory. The Nazis were infamous for their disregard for the facts of war in favor of relying on the fighting spirit and predestined success of their Aryan soldiers. The Nazis also really liked the Vikings, and Viking runes in particular, to the point where they would wear them. This connection is unfortunately so deep that modern white nationalists still wear them. It's gotten to the point where the Anti-Defamation League was forced to classify Thor's god-dang hammer as a hate symbol. If Eggers' goal was to make
The most accurate Viking movie that's ever been made.
and reclaim Vikings from white supremacists, a scene where a historically inaccurate group of buff Nordic people beat a bunch of Eastern Europeans against all odds because they're inherently better and maybe the gods are backing them, was not it, Chief. There's something that kind of inherently grosses me out about this idea that these wolfmen fight harder than these men who are protecting their families because
They're just so badass. Because they're not human. Because humans never fight hard. Only wolves can fight hard.
And I guess to wrap up here, I have to ask the question, why is this scene in the movie? On a broader plot level, it basically just establishes that Amleth is a badass and does morally fucked up things. In the saga this is based off of, Amleth is known for his sharp wit, not for being a goddamn murder machine. As it is, it feels like a gratuitous power fantasy working against Eggers' stated goals here. I think in this case, it would have done a lot to reclaim the source material from white supremacists if Amleth was simply depicted with more historical accuracy to ground him a little bit. It would read a lot less like Nazi fantasy if Amleth respected the danger posed by his opponents enough to wear armor, and if he had to use cunning to defeat them. That would also slot in very nicely with the source material, which I plan on covering in more detail in a future video. Hi, Wesley from the future here. I found this video where Eggers actually explains this scene in his own words, and instead of redoing this whole video, I've decided to use it for my conclusion here. I'd like to start by saying that Eggers clearly really does care about historical accuracy. He brought in a lot of historians. The sets, costumes, and even the original accents were done with a lot of care. Amleth and his friends are Berserkers, and Eggers even acknowledges the historical ambiguity surrounding Berserker. What I'm trying to criticize here is the kind of historical accuracy he focuses on. I have this clip here.
You know, Alex's character is supposed to be the size of a bear, but with the cunning of a wolf. There's many hypotheses about these guys, but just what we went with is the idea that through like a shamanic weapons dance, they fall into this state where they believe that they are literally transforming into beasts. They lose their humanity and become literal bears and wolves, or werebears and werewolves, and are sort of invincible on the battlefield. These figures exist in Viking poetry and in the sagas, but there are accounts from the Viking Age of people who've been attacked by Vikings saying, like, these guys seemed like absolutely crazy. Like, I've never seen anything like this crazed, insane rage on the battlefield. Thinking about if they were a bear or a wolf and what their fighting style might be and whatever, but I think that because this Slavic village isn't full of elite warriors, the Vikings that invaded the village don't have to do the most complicated stuff to win.
Where he's very concerned with the historical accuracy of the fighting moves, and then talks about how they don't have to get fancy since the militia aren't elite, which is bullshit. Eggers cares a lot about the accuracy of material elements, but he doesn't even consider the fact that when you're naked, an untrained guy with a long, sharp stick is still a serious threat to you, especially when he has the high ground and your arms are busy climbing. He completely disregards the idea that non-elite warriors could put up a meaningful resistance here. So when he says he doesn't want to glorify violence, I believe him, But then he shoots a scene making brutality look incredibly cool, and he's completely uninterested in asking himself, why build fortifications at all when less than a dozen naked dudes can effortlessly scale them? Assuming they think they're animals, that is. It all comes together to make this kind of badass mythic past that white supremacists go fucking Cocoa Puffs over. In this case, Eggers wasn't trying to cater to white supremacists. He just wanted to make the protagonist look cool, which is the default state of historical epics. He accidentally catered exactly to what white supremacists like through this one sliver where he just decided to go off movie logic. This is a repeating pattern in the movie that I'd like to expand upon in future videos, so subscribe to catch those. Also, if I got anything wrong, please correct me in the comments. Drive that engagement, baby.